And joining me now is a very, very special guest. I am the only preacher in America that could say I did the Apollo stage with her. MSNBC's own Rachel Maddow. She's here to make some sense out of some of the news of the day and her most recent project, which is a documentary called The Dirty Work, about the life and legacy of civil rights icon Andrew Young. Rachel, we'll talk about your incredible documentary in a moment, but first let's start with the breaking headlines of today. The administration has fired at least 4,000 federal employees during this government shutdown. A former senior official said the CDC cuts wipe out entire offices that investigate disease outbreaks and manage infectious disease responses. Today, Vice President J.D. Vance was on the Sunday shows saying government shutdowns inevitably lead to some chaos and there was nothing we could do. But aren't they causing the chaos?
It is rich to see the vice president, who's a very smart man, obviously, talk about this like Republicans are bystanders to anything going on in the government. When they control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. They have made this great performative show over the fact that they need Democrats for nothing. And if Democrats want to do anything, that by definition means that that's something that they don't want to do and they won't consent to. So, I mean, this is a project of their own making. And you know, Rev, you and I have both covered and both experienced shutdowns under presidents of both parties, right, under Congress being in control of both parties. But, I mean, what Chairwoman Clark just said there is exactly right. Like, think about how familiar this feels. Didn't we just see all these headlines about firing thousands of government workers? Didn't we just see other headlines about firing people at the CDC or firing people at Social Security or firing people at the IRS or firing people at the Veterans Administration? Yes, what's different is that this is a Republican Party. This is a Trump administration that revels in the destruction of the government. Whether it's DOJ, whether it's through this shutdown, whether it's through a Russell vote, whether it's any way they can, they are doing everything they can to destroy this government. And so, yeah, we've had shutdowns before, but we've never had one before where they have no interest in the shutdown ending. They want to use it to break the government and to destroy the government as best they can through any means at their disposal.
And rehire people, they say, that agrees with the president's program. Yeah. You know, Trump is on a retribution tour. Just last week, his Justice Department brought charges against New York Attorney General Letitia James, I just mentioned, for alleged mortgage fraud. Each month, he indicted FBI Director James Comey. The list of other potential targets is long, including some of his own former advisors like John Bolton and elected Democrats like Congressman Adam Schiff, just to name a few. If he continues down this list with these charges, how does this end?
I'd turn it back around, actually. I'm interested to know your answer to this, Rev, because, I mean, you've seen government retribution in action in a lot of different ways over the course of your career. And I'm interested to hear what you say. I mean, I think that the most obvious answer is probably the real one, which is that they want to make it either illegal or terrifying to oppose him. Right. And so they're putting heads on pikes and putting those pikes up at the edge of the, you know, at the gates to the city to say it's not possible to criticize, let alone oppose this president. If you do, look what we're going to do to you and your family and your career and your livelihood and your reputation. And I think that's all it is. And I think that they don't have anybody holding them back, and so they're going to do it as long as they can and as much as they can. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think they will do it as long as they can, until they realize that it backfires and they're really creating martyrs. I think that they will end up making people like Tish James and others much more powerful and influential than they thought they were. Because every time I've seen them do this in the past, me growing up in the civil rights movement, they ended up making people more significant than they thought they were reducing. But it costs people to do it. It's not a walk through the garden for those that are targeted, and I've been there. It's something you have to be strong enough, and as Tish James said, fearless, but you have to know at the end of it is going to end up helping the cause that you stand for.
I was struck by the fact that and I saw a headline about this. I haven't looked into it myself, but I have seen it reported that Tish James had never had a fundraising day in her life in public office like she did when Trump indicted her.
Will do next. Joining me now is Dan Rayfield, the Attorney General of Oregon, and Nicholas Kristof, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist with the New York Times and author of Chasing Hope, A Reporter's Life. Good morning to both of you, gentlemen. Thank you for being with us. Attorney General Rayfield, there are a number of legal arguments. We compressed that into an opening, but there's a number of things to follow here. First of all, can you clarify what the appeals court stay means? Allowing Trump to federalize but not deploy the National Guard. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of this middle ground, right, where they said, hey, you can keep the National Guard under the control of the president. However, you just can't move those troops into the city of Portland, right? You can't deploy them into the city, which effectively, was a win for us as we thought about this. But we still have a lot more ground to cover, in court to make sure that the president doesn't normalize the use of military troops in our cities.
Nicholas, I've spent a good amount of time in Portland, not as much as you have. You grew up in Oregon, not too far from Portland. It's a great place. You spent a lot of time there. You wrote a recent piece for the New York Times. A couple of things people who are not from Portland should probably understand. This is one of those cities in America that has a proud tradition of protest. They like their protest. They're actually pretty creative about it. And they get into protests. But it's not this coloring of it as some kind of a war zone is just not true.
Absolutely, Ali. Look, I mean, two things can be true at the same time. One, Portland has real challenges. There is a real problem with crime, with drug use, with commercial vacancies, with homelessness. Yeah. And there have been skirmishes in front of the ICE facility, especially back in June. But it's also true that it's absurd for Trump to call this a war-ravaged city, to say that it's full of insurrectionists. I mean, there are the protest today is going to be in the form of a naked bike ride, which kind of reflects what kind of a war zone this supposedly is. As Judge Emmergut said, the president's words are simply untethered from the facts.
Attorney General, I had a conversation with Zach Beecham a little while ago about this concept of not just federalizing Guard troops, but sending them from states to other states. That's been done in the cases of like hurricanes and national disasters where a government asks for help because the population doesn't support enough National Guard members. But now we've got California involved. Texas is involved, though they're not suing to avoid it. How does everybody get involved in this?
Well, I mean, this is what the president is doing right now. He gets told he can't use the Oregon National Guard, so he tries to use the California National Guard. He gets told he can't use the California National Guard, so he tries to go use the Texas National Guard. It's an incredibly cute way to kind of maneuver around the court, and the court wasn't having it. But it really sets up this dangerous precedent where you start using the military, the National Guard of different states, and deploying them against a different state's will into their state. It's a very dangerous precedent. And you got to remember, right? Oregon's a city and Portland's a city where we are reducing crime since the beginning of the year. I mean, it's a 51% reduction in violent crime in Oregon. We don't even rank anywhere near the close when it comes to other states or other cities when it comes to crime in our state. So when you look at those dynamics, those are actually untethered from what the president needs to deploy the military. So this is what people need to remember. Got to have an invasion, not one going on in Oregon. You got to have a rebellion or a threat of a rebellion. Think about that. No rebellion going on in Oregon, or the president has to be unable to effectuate the laws of the United States, and none of those conditions exist, right? And so the things that he's talking about, public safety, those are things that you have your police agencies working on, your sheriff's department, your Oregon State Police, your district attorney, not the United States military. It's very bizarre right now.
So you've pointed this out, Nicholas, in your article. I want to go back to it, in which you write, if Trump wanted to help Portland deal with its challenges, there are many ways he could do so with the $10 million that was the estimated cost of his deployment of the Oregon National Guard. He could help with treatment for substance abuse, with emergency housing, with education. But the worry here in Portland is that troops won't address any of the city's actual challenges and will instead provoke unrest. This is the same story for Washington, D.C., for any of these other cities. They got problems, but they're mostly municipal or state policy problems or policing issues. But this business of provoking unrest seems to be key here. Donald Trump's been carrying on about Portland, Oregon since his first term. He wants it to be the example of the place where he goes there and provokes something to happen, which justifies the addition of troops to the mix.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And frankly, in our minds as Oregonians is the fact that in 2020, the George Floyd protests were diminishing in Portland. They were on the decline. And then President Trump sent in federal troops. And the upshot was that those protests magnified and became more serious and did become more violent. And frankly, there were protesters who fell into Trump's trap and created this narrative of an out of control Portland that he was trying to foment. And, you know, I think this time Oregonians are determined not to fall in that trap again. The emphasis of Mayor Keith Wilson and others has been don't take the bait. And, you know, that's one reason why you see all these animal costumes. I think there's a real determination to mock President Trump's silliness, but not to let this degenerate into violence.
Yeah, the animal costumes are fantastic. We're showing you some of them right now. Attorney General, two issues. One is, and the leaders in Illinois have been making this point, too, that you just made about the legality, what the Insurrection Act is meant for, what it's not meant for. You've also said that it's important for us to, quote, recognize the moment we're in and see what he's doing.
Mistake. This is what we've been talking about. He's united the opposition even more so with these vindictive prosecutions. Because he's targeting, on the one hand, you know, a Democratic politician, a Democratic official, Tish James, who's a fairly progressive Democrat. We've seen her with Mamdani, so, you know, she's probably, you know, at least a center-left person. And then you have John Bolton, who is a neocon extremist. With regard to foreign policy, he is extreme right. Right? So you've built the much of the political spectrum, not all of it, I guess, but much of the political spectrum in who you're targeting. And Comey is also a Republican, and again, is one of the reasons Trump became president. He's not MAGA, but he is a conservative. And so, you know, any pretense that Donald Trump was going to be different, that he was going to respect the Constitution, we knew that wasn't going to happen. But anybody left who thought he would, now they're either convinced alongside us, or they'll never be convinced. And so this is one of those moments where everyone says it's never going to stop. The list, there's no end to the list. I've talked about this with totalitarians, with fascists like Trump. They always need an enemy. They always need an other. They always need a scapegoat. And it starts with usually identifiable groups. You know, for Trump, it's going to be trans people. It's going to be African Americans. It's going to be undocumented people, but just Hispanics in general, because they're just arresting anybody that looks undocumented, right? Which is an excuse to target the Latino community and other groups as well. And Donald Trump is targeting them, but it'll never stop with them. It'll include his own people. It'll include Republicans in Congress. It'll include, as it did, his former vice president. It'll include everybody. No one will be safe from Donald Trump. You need to get that through your head. No one will. No one. There's only one man safe from Trump, and that's Trump himself. But given how dangerously he's acting, I don't know if he's even safe from his own evil.